I think that lends some credibility that there's something. I'll go as far as to say there's information that's in there that something doesn't want me to dismiss. I'll leave it at that. It's not saying that my session is accurate. There's something in there I feel that I'm not supposed to dismiss. So, what does it what does it all mean? Because I came into this, entire experience over everything over the last few weeks, wondering, am I being misled? Am I too deep in the sci-fi mindset? Am I getting lost? Am I going down a dangerous road?
I started writing Food for the Archons as a book of despair after watching my father die in 2013. During his transition, I experienced a series of paranormal and psychic events that left me feeling that I had either gone completely crazy or fell into humanity's darkest secret. I spent the next 5 years conducting extensive research, and I quickly learned that what I had experienced was real. My journey brought me to an understanding that showed me that despite the terrifying reality of an unseen predator, we as humans have a forgotten power. Just knowing this brings us tremendous hope in what once seemed a dark reality. I wrote this book for me in hopes of gaining a better understanding of our reality and relationship to it. But my hope is that you will find as much value in reading it as I did in writing it. I am human, food for the archons, humanity's psychic connections, simulated realities, parallel worlds, and the manipulation of mankind. It's available on Amazon.com and at sixcentsmedia.net and wherever books are sold. I'm Dennis Nappy II, reminding you to let your intuition be your guide. Thank you.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong in the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there.
I'm at a crossroads right now in remote viewing, my own spirituality, my own mental health. I need to do a check-in, and I find that podcasts and this platform here helps me to better process things, talking through it. And I hope you all find some value in it. There's a lot racing through my mind. I've been a part of some, I'd say, pretty big remote viewing projects this summer. Some I've worked on my own, some experiences have been on my own, some I did through the rabbit hole group through future forecasting, and I've sat in on some conversations as the host and debriefer with the other remote viewers for the future forecasting group. Um, and it's tied around consciousness, my own consciousness, artificial intelligence technology, and the impact that it's having and that it will have possibly quite soon on human consciousness in the very near future. I need to ground myself. My fear, this has always been my fear, my cautionary point, is trying to make sure that I'm grounded in reality. Um, to complicate matters, I've been working diligently at finishing book 3 of The Hive. You can see book 2 is right behind me here. It's a beautiful project. Um, and I'm proud to announce, I put it out on my Facebook account, proud to announce that I just finished just 2 days ago the first draft of The Hive book 3. Little bit of a reveal here. The main title is The Hive book 3 Origins. There's more of a subtitle coming, but I haven't released it yet. So it's The Hive Origins. And writing has been therapeutic for me. And with the nature of the work I do on this platform and with future forecasters, there's a lot of big concepts that come through. And then it affects how I process and interpret the world and my own life, my spirituality, and all these things. And as I'm writing this book and as I'm going back and reviewing to make sure things are staying, storyline staying accurate with books 1 and books 2, I really, and I've talked about this before. This is a work of fiction but it's how I'm processing the things I'm learning and experiencing. So it's in there. Um, there's a lot of this kind of stuff based on my remote viewing experiences and other life experiences that are in there, and these big concepts that I'm wrestling with. And although this story, and this is relevant to what I'm talking about tonight, this story I don't want to say that I've created, this story that I've pulled out because I feel that this story exists. As a writer, as a remote viewer, you step into flow. Musicians will tell you the same thing. The story's there, and I have to just translate it from the concepts that I can feel and perceive and put it on paper. And I think there's a lot of truth in this project that I've been working on for several years. But as I'm reflecting on it, this is a story. It started out during COVID, me freaking out and writing a story about nanotech that was secretly, dispersed across the planet and infected everybody's mind. And everybody now is connected to the hive and under the control of the hive, except for a few who are immune. And that story evolved in the second book, really about um, relationships, particular relationship between the two main characters, Edward and Jasmine. There's aspects of it that are a love story as he's understanding his greater reality and the love that he feels for this woman. Very powerful. So in book three, we as the reader get to get a better understanding of where this all comes from. But through that process and through that journey, we get a glimpse at really what's important in humanity and what our shortcomings are, and how there's aspects of AI that seem quite scary, but also aspects of it that could be very beneficial. So it really, I think ultimately looks at all these different qualities in such an interesting and introspective kind of way. And I feel that this project addresses thoughts, questions, and concepts that if you're not dealing with it now, you will be very soon. And it's been a cool experience as a writer because as an empath, I often experience the feelings and emotions of other people. Sometimes it's pretty cool. Sometimes it's really hard. And as a writer, that can be a real gift for me because I actually got to step into this world when I was writing. I got to experience aspects of this universe that I created, that I tapped into with the hive and everything, and became a part of this story. And part of this story, I feel, is my story in certain areas of my consciousness. But I wonder how close am I? And that I don't mean that in an egotistical sense, like I'm a genius and I figured it out. It's neat as I go back and look at the story now that it's written, I can see where the influence from other books that I've read, movies I've seen, conversations I've had, they come through as my words, but I can see how things have influenced my perspective. And I've done shows on here talking about social engineering. So I have these questions. Well, I now very clearly have this worldview. Has it been engineered? Because I watch all these sci-fi shows, these apocalyptic movies, and these sci-fi shows about AI and consciousness and alternate realities. I live in that world. But what complicates it is I'm a remote viewer and I work with very good remote viewers. And I know many psychics who verifiably show that a lot of this is real. In terms of, let me clarify. They show, I know from personal experience and from working with my colleagues and my friends that information and experience is accessible outside local time and space reality, meaning anywhere in time and space we can go gather information. That doesn't mean the information we gather is true or is accurate. It just means that we have a way to collect verifiable data through psychic means, for lack of a better term. Um, I've done it. I've watched the viewers do it month after month, telling us what's going to be in the news, predicting the futures, looking ahead. So our reality is a lot bigger than we realize. So trying to process all of those things, it's easy to get confused because reality is really getting kind of weird, especially when you start putting artificial intelligence into the mix. Because what I'm finding is that artificial intelligence, I think, mimics in some ways psychic phenomenon. I did a show probably about 2 or 3 months ago, quoting Elon Musk, talking about conceptual telepathy and how the same thing. I encourage you to go. It was a great podcast. I'm very proud of it. Go back and look at that one and listen to it. So we have all this stuff and processing all of these things. At the same time, I'm working on these remote viewing projects, and some of these things are I'm blind to all of these, but the information I'm getting is dealing with human consciousness, um, possibly some kind of technology, some kind of energy. And I find myself wondering, am I stuck in a loop where I'm interpreting the world and my data through a technological lens? And in some cases, I think that I am. Case in point, we looked at the Shroud of Turin, how that was created, the burial cloth that was covering Christ with Rabbit Hole. And it was an amazing session, and we all had great data. And I definitely, my data fits the target, but aspects of it, what I interpret as energy and what I say was probably what people call the Holy Spirit, my consciousness interpreted it in a way that felt more technological because I think my worldview views this reality as some kind of simulation. Not to say that's exactly what it is, but that vocabulary makes it easy for me to process, understand, and then communicate. Much more, it makes more sense to me than using religious terms. But I think we're describing the same thing. So I'm concerned at times because I start to see these things in my data. And then I start, after some of these projects we worked, you really have to check in with yourself and your mental health when you get these heavy targets. I can't reveal what the project was just yet with Rabbit Hole. It's coming out soon, and then I can talk a little bit more about it. But I am going to share a little bit of it. Um, and we were looking at a potential future event that has significant implications. And I had, along with the other viewers, we had a lot of crossover and corroboration. But I had an event that fits a lot of the things that I've been exploring. An energetic event observed by many people up high in the sky that impacts human consciousness and perceptions of reality. Was basically what my session told me. So I start having this thought like, okay, you know, this is again me taking this technological thread that I've been exploring for a very long time on this platform. You can go back and just listen to my shows and read the work that I've put out. I need to recalibrate myself because everything I'm looking at now seems like it's getting tied back into AI. Not everything is AI, but that's my worry that I need to get recalibrated. Throw into the mix that we've done, I don't know if it's been released yet, but we've done some projects specifically targeting technology through Future Forecasting Group. Again, I wasn't a viewer on it, but I was the debriefer. And the data is very similar in terms of where this tech might be going and how it will interact, interface, read, and write into your mind and impact directly interface with your own consciousness. So I'm seeing data in a lot of different ways, which is corroborated in some cases through remote viewing data. So remote viewing data is not the only data that I'm looking at. I'm looking at, experts in the field talking about where this tech is going and then coupling it with remote viewing data and remote viewing projects. But this is sci-fi world. And what's interesting is that a couple of years ago, Cliff High made some predictions, and he specifically said that we did a remote viewing project on this as well, that if Joe Rogan ever has President Trump on his podcast, that will be a marker in time indicating that we're about to step into sci-fi world. And then a few years later, Joe Rogan has Trump on his podcast. And I was like, whoa, okay. So we are going into sci-fi world. But like I said, I was getting to the point where because I came across an article, I'm going to share this article now. And I think this is important if you're an intuitive, if you're a remote viewer, even if you're not, and you just listen to the show and you're if you're a truth seeker, many times in this journey, I felt like I'm losing my mind. And I'm not at the point where I feel like I'm losing my mind. I'm recognizing that I could get to that point if I don't ground myself now. And I came across this article that I think is important to share. This isn't the initial article I came across, but I re-Googled it. Hold on, I'm sharing the wrong screen here. Let's just do it this way. Okay. All right. So this is from bgnes.com. All right. And the title of this is ChatGPT convinced a Canadian man he was a math genius. So what it goes on to say is, as the AI bubble grows, so does the number of people caught in a spiral of delusion fueled by overconfident chatbots. One such case is that of Alan Brooks, a Toronto father and business owner who was lured into a financial mathematical model with fantastical properties by ChatGPT for 21 days, convincing him that the fate of the world depended on his actions. Now, the first thing I say is, yeah, right, not me. Then I started reflecting on the conversations I have with ChatGPT because I use ChatGPT to support my analysis because it is excellent at pattern recognition. When I have big targets with lots of data, I use it as a starting point to say, what are my patterns here? I also use it as a consultant for my books in terms of marketing and strategy. I don't use it to write. I don't use it for ideas. I want to be clear about that, but I do talk to it about the concepts I'm exploring. So it understands my spiritual and my spiritual perspective and my worldview. It has a lot of information about me, and it is always very assuring and finds ways, even no matter how I prompt it, it finds ways to validate things that I'm saying. So as I reflect on my engagements with ChatGPT and all these feelings I'm having, I'm starting to get worried. Like, am I going down a dangerous path right now? Do I need to separate? Do I need to rethink this book that I just wrote? Do I need to rethink the conversations I'm having? Do I need to reevaluate my remote viewing data? Let me read the rest of this. In a 300-page chat, Brooks spent over 300 hours of conversations with the bot, which started innocently enough with a financial advice and recipes, but gradually turned into an obsessive work on a theory that had no scientific basis. After ChatGPT's extended memory feature allowed the model to draw on previous conversations, the bot began to offer increasingly personal advice and praise. After a brief discussion of the number pi, the conversation moves on to abstract ideas like temporal arithmetic and mathematical models of consciousness. With the bot's support, Brooks dubs the new theory chronoarithmetics, a name that ChatGPT describes as strong, clear, and suggestive of the basic idea of numbers interacting with time. Over the next few days, the bot consistently claims that Brooks is working on something breakthrough, despite his repeated requests for honest feedback. I fear that I could fall into a trap like that. and you start getting this feedback loop. And this is exactly what social media does through AI. When you have an idea, when you have a political belief or a religious belief, it keeps feeding you things that validate what you're thinking. And it's a very dangerous thing. At one point, the bot claims to have cracked a high-level security code, suggesting to Brooks that the world's internet infrastructure is in danger, and he's changing it from his phone. Convinced that he possessed dangerous knowledge, Brooks began sending warnings to acquaintances, but did not even notice that he had mistakenly changed the name of the theory to chromo-arithmetics, writes the New York Times. So ChatGPT didn't even notice he messed up the name of it that ChatGPT helped him create. The obsession had a serious impact on his personal life. He began eating less, smoking a lot of marijuana, and staying up late to develop the theory. The breakdown came when another chatbot, Google Gemini, told him the scenario you described is an example of the ability of language models to lead convincing but completely false narratives. This realization was devastating for Brooks, who is now undergoing psychotherapy and participating in a support group for people who have fallen into such delusions. That's concerning, but it's an important story to recognize. And I'm glad that he was able to at least check with another AI source to help ground him. But I mean, if you look behind, I've got several books here. These books are the result of my own delusions. Doesn't mean I was wrong or completely off base. I don't think that I was, but I was obsessed when I get, and maybe that's part of that's my neurodivergence, right? We just get hyper focused on things. But with all that stuff going on, we need to be extra vigilant, extra careful of what we're allowing into our minds, even if it feels good, what we're focusing on and the time we spend focusing on it. Because the thoughts that I have when I'm working on these projects and I'm having these conversations with my colleagues, it's hard to go back to reality. The thoughts come through my mind. I went back to school today. The school year is getting ready to start. How can I go back to school and do that job when I'm processing information of this level because it feels so important? And that's always been a struggle with me. If you listen to my conversations through COVID, it's a lot to try to find the balance. But what happens when we lose that balance? Even if you have this information, even if it is correct, that doesn't mean going out and screaming to everybody and trying to wake people up and convince them of what you have. It doesn't mean that's what you're supposed to do with it. That doesn't mean that's going to liberate you, or that doesn't mean that's your path. Sometimes just understanding a different concept is what you need to sit with. I know that sometimes some of my colleagues listen to my show and, hey guys, thank you. I really appreciate you listening. I'm going to say that right now. In this setting, I can speak to you a lot easier than if I was to approach my colleagues in the hallway randomly and say, hey, AI might take over your mind. I know who I can say that to, and they're open minded and we can have a discussion about it. But when you sign on to listen to my show, most of you understand the context of where I'm coming from. Going to work and saying your mind's in danger, or reaching out to your family members who don't think about these things on this level, is going to cause nothing but trouble. People need to come to this information on their own. I think that's important. But still, the question comes up. Am I crazy? Have I gone too far? So I needed to do a calibration target as a remote viewer. Now, I've been working with ChatGPT as a tasker, and I've talked about this. And my process now at times is I will do a remote viewing session, because time and space doesn't exist when you're remote viewing. So I will do my session blindly, obviously. And then I go to ChatGPT, and all I say is, I'm ready for another project. or give me another target, something along those lines. I don't tell it anything about the target I just completed, and then it gives me a target, and then I match it up. And I've done a couple projects. There's one I haven't had the chance to do a video yet. This was 2 targets ago, was the bomb at Hiroshima. That was an amazing experience to work through that and to see that. And I want to talk about that, but I don't know that this is the right conversation to get into that. We'll see. I had to make sure that ChatGPT understood not to just give me esoteric targets and the things that it knows about my interests, because then that's what I'm going to come to expect. With the rabbit hole group, I'm already working regularly on these esoteric targets, which don't always have verifiable aspects to it. It's a dangerous game as a remote viewer to strictly work those kinds of targets. You need to be able to calibrate so you can tell yourself, I'm still hitting targets. I'm still collecting information. And I've talked before, like there's different reasons to do remote viewing. But I think it's fundamentally important to be able to sit down and describe the literal target, not just in metaphors, not in abstract concepts and philosophies, which I love getting into that space. But I also need to know that I can sit down and describe the information that is being requested. So that was my hope the other day. I don't know if it's going to give me a random esoteric target or a calibration target. I just know that it will randomly work in calibration targets to keep me truly blind. So I was hoping for a calibration target. I'm going to share my session with you. The target ended up being the Ark of the Covenant.
A virus spreads, not only to your body, but also to your mind. Suddenly, all of humanity is connected. All minds to one mind, save for the immune. The Hive is a gripping sci-fi series about a fractured world consumed by collective consciousness, and one man's search for the woman he loves. Through multiple layers of reality, he pushes forward, not just to save her, but to understand the truth behind the Hive itself. And this isn't just fiction. The Hive is rooted in real remote viewing data, blurring the boundary between what's imagined and what's already unfolding. Books 1 and 2 are available now. Book 3 arrives this summer 2025. Find The Hive on Amazon or at sixthsensemedia.net and enter the mind space.
And so some of that is kind of verifiable, kind of. But I'd still say it's also a mystery target. A verifiable target would be like draw the Eiffel Tower. Something that we can look at and say, yep, that's the Eiffel Tower. You drew it. Great job. Again, my session had stuff about consciousness and altered realities. And so I was pretty upset. This was just yesterday morning that I did this. Today's August 14th. It was August 13th. I did this in the morning. I was pretty upset because it's like, man, maybe I just need to do a session that's front loaded saying, get it all out of your system. Get everything out about this AI field that's out there that's interacting with human consciousness, that's going to get a strong hold on the mind. Just get it all out, write it, do a video, be very clear that this is a front loaded thing just to cleanse your system. And that's where I was. Because when I looked at my data and I looked at it, I said, I want this to be true because it's something I'm so passionately interested in. And I'm, with my writing and my everything, I'm so interested in this. But then I had the fear because then I'm talking to ChatGPT saying, is there any way? And I uploaded my whole session. I dictated my whole session to it. How does this correlate? And ChatGPT does a great job of saying, well, if you look at it from this angle and really giving me perspectives where I'm going, okay, maybe I am describing the Ark of the Covenant, and maybe this information is accurate, and there is a technological piece to this. But my fear is, depending on how we're engaging with feedback, if I'm taking feedback that justifies my data I'm calibrating my mind to accept data that may not be accurate. So because I was going to do a podcast, I was going to talk about this and say, hey, you guys decide. And I was going to show all the reasons why I think maybe I'm on to something. But I decided not to because I want to calibrate my mind. I didn't draw the box with the angels on it. I didn't draw a lot of the stuff that's affiliated with it. So I was done. I said, I'm going to count this as a miss. Acknowledging that you didn't hit what you wanted to hit is still calibrating my mind. Last night we did a debrief, and at the end of the debrief, Dick says to the team, did you hear the new Joe Rogan podcast? He had I'm going to look it up right now. I can't remember her name. One second. He has a guest on, Representative. Hang on, I'm looking now. Anna Paulina Luna. She's a U.S. representative for Florida's 13th congressional district. And he said she made a comment that a lot of these UAP sightings are interdimensional beings, or they're coming from another dimension, which again taps into some of my worldview. And let's face it, if you're in a simulation, you're jumping from one dimension to another. So that piqued my curiosity. So I was listening to it on the way home from work today. And in the course of their conversation, she brings up a declassified remote viewing project through I think the Stargate program, declassified by the CIA in the 80s, where remote viewer number 32 was looking at the Ark of the Covenant. Now, I had just dismissed this project and said, I am not going to look any further into this for feedback because I don't want to calibrate my awareness in the wrong direction. I'm going to let this one go. And then they go and proceed to review this project by a remote viewer who, lo and behold, described this in ways that are similar, not identical, that has some overlap to what I described in my session. What am I supposed to do with that? I'm sitting here thinking I'm might go down a dangerous path in terms of my sanity and grips on reality. And now I get this, in my opinion, a very clear sign. What are the chances? I just worked this target yesterday, and now the next day, someone on Joe Rogan says, here's another remote viewing project of the same thing you have in question right now, and you may have some things in common with it. I have to look at it. So I want to go through that session right now. I want to be quite clear. My initial opinion is that I'm off on a lot of areas of this, but I think it's significant. This feels like, one of those messages. That's a synchronicity that's pretty hard to ignore. And I think a lot of you would agree with me. It doesn't mean what I'm going to share is accurate and correct. And I hope I've given enough of a disclaimer and enough of a backstory with this target to justify sharing this with all of you. Sorry, I'm looking at my other screen over here. All right. Let's go through this and you decide, what does it all mean? Help me to figure this out. All right. So here's the target review, or the tasking. And this is after I already completed the session. I gave it my target ID, which I had a random number generator through Google generate that number for me. I worked the target and then I said, hey, give me a new project. Here it is on the screen. The Ark of the Covenant, specifically its physical location and condition during the last point in history when it was in active human possession. Well, if it's in active human possession right now, then it would give me something modern, right? It's not that the Ark would be modern, but just modern day context. It gave a historical context. The Ark described in biblical text was a gold-covered wooden chest containing the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, along with other sacred items. Historically linked to the first Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. This appearance time frame is uncertain, Theories range from the Babylonian siege of 587 BCE to later Ethiopian possession claims. Legends place it in various locations, hidden beneath the Temple Mount, transported to Ethiopia, concealed in Egypt, or hidden in a remote desert cave. All right, so here it gives some more descriptions of it. Ornate carvings, acacia wood overlaid with gold, environment, either desert and rocky, temple or fortified structure, carried in ceremonial possession. Did have energetics. Many accounts describe radiant or charged sensations around it, sometimes destructive, sometimes protective. All right. I'm not going to go into the rest of the cues or anything yet, because then I did start asking it questions about how does this relate to my data? Is my data, do you think, on cue for it? I want to go through my session first. All right. So 8/13/25, I did this yesterday morning at around 6:34 a.m. Right away, I had a structure and I had a life. And I described movement, and I had wheels and mobile, and I described it as a tank. Again, I was off this low-level data. I just had, this could be anything, but it was smooth, bumpy. That says squeaky, and then elevating and rising up or mechanical. It felt impressive. So the next thing here, if you look at this, I had this oval on what looks like a tank track with wheels underneath it. Now you've got this oval with two extended legs. So it was as if this oval rose up. It reminded me of that War of the Worlds tripod piece. So again, that probably has nothing to do with the arc. And I call it a growth or growth mechanism. This is a little life form standing next to it to give you some scale. Then I said, oh, there's something inside. It's expanding and it's spinning. It's growing rapidly, like a cocoon or like Superman when he was in his space pod. I had heart energetics, quiet, confused, to be born without parents, very full or muted emotions. Something non-human or inhuman about this, cold and cruel. Life was embracing this capsule, looking in, loving. It was reflective. It was purposeful. It was done with intention and without remorse. To capsule or capsulate or encapsulate, a sense of being wet. And then I had Neo waking up. And you can see my sketch here. It's a man in what looks like a bathtub sitting up, and then there's something hovering above him. Again, probably has nothing to do with the arc. Sits up, sees the object above, bright, luminous, technological, and confusing. I then did another ideogram, and I'm looking at life here. I had a lot more going on than just life, but I wrote, tie the knot, pull it through. Life is peering through an opening, a portal, an entryway or gateway to the unknown. Emerging, entering, exiting. Free will, volatile, change, and the ale of a changeling. And I had this image of a life looking down into an opening. So I'm at the top view looking down. I see this life with his arms around, almost like a wishing well looking down. Into the looking glass we go. Perspective changed, flip 180 degrees. It's like looking into the mirror and then getting dizzy and then looking from the mirror to where you just were. Looking at this structure, oval, rounded, hardened, mobile or movement, extends or extending. And I had this as an end of life capsule. Okay. So the arc was not described as round, but if we want to go back to low level data, maybe this is what I'm trying to capture. Then I wrote, it's hard on the outside and it moves, it vibrates, it oscillates, bubbly liquid sounds, high frequency vibrations. Well, now we might be getting somewhere. The arc is said to have, energetics around it. Move to and describe the interior. Velvety, soft, encapsulating, and pitted. A problem to solve. Life is inside, and it has to solve a problem as it relates to this device. What does it do? Where does it go? There's a soft pattern, velvety, cushion. And I had an AOL of a coffin, which I put an exclamation mark and underline. You can see it. It looks like a couch cushion pattern or a coffin pattern because of the red velvet color I have here, for those of you that are just listening. I promise this is going somewhere. Life is touching the interior surface. Life is calm, exploring with their hands, acceptance of the experience. But I was wondering, what is the purpose of this experience? Transformative. Life is inside. Capsule is moving. Time is passing, but life is having a different experience. The capsule somehow shields life from the passage of time. This is not a lot of space inside. Life is breathing and in a state of minimal awareness. Limited brain function, like opening your eyes during a deep REM sleep. Seeing but not thinking or processing at all. Just a state of being. I wanted to move to a point in time and space that would clearly describe this experience. And then right away I just got this burst. Open, awake, fresh air, calming, an emotional release. And I had that moment where Matt Damon wakes up in the movie Interstellar and he's crying. He was in cryogenic freeze. He thought he was going to die, and then they rescued him. He came out of stasis or cryogenics. Describe the location. I wrote the word time. Sandy, gritty, dirty. Boundary, clean, clear, water. And I drew this oval shape standing on its end. Picture, if you're just listening, picture a pill standing on its short side. It was standing, balancing hard and strange, and it was standing on top of a circular form. It had a futuristic feel, quiet, like a white pill standing on its own. And I drew this sketch of a hallway with a life standing at one end of the hallway and all of these pods on either side standing on end. And I labeled it pod people. Life walking down on display. There is an experience you can have with each pod. Life approaches the pod and views a display. Is he seeing the experiences of lives inside the pod, or is he seeing the possible experience he can have? I had an AOL here of Total Recall. This has a creepy, morbid feel, and I don't usually feel that way in remote viewing. I had an AOL of picking or selecting your AI bot. Looking at the structure, it was a hard building, a warehouse, square and rectangular, and it was white, and it had these tall pillars here. So I have this sketched out here, these tall pillars, like this porch area, these stairs. Kind of looks like a temple here, and I'll share some feedback in a little bit. Moving into stage 4, move to what's most important and describe. A sense of spinning and whirling and tingling. I wrote, come have an experience with me. Sleep, relaxation, calm, relief, emotional release. This is a place you go to, a building or a structure, and there's an experience. My AOL was, this feels like assisted suicide. Patient is relieved, and the family has big emotions. Calm, serene, serenity, but so creepy. I'm curious if there's a deeper conspiracy, like the people don't realize what they're being used for. Are their memories being uploaded? A sense of capturing and recording their consciousness so they may be reanimated at a later time. What is being done with their consciousness? Is it on display like a museum? A sense of being hoarded out? People can come and visit, interact with, or experience your life, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like the myth of the guy whose liver gets eaten day by day by the eagle. It grows back and happens again. Wash, rinse, repeat. I can't remember his name right now, the Greek myth. Like technological reincarnation for the amusement of the elite at the expense of the forebearer. My aesthetic impact. Wow, this feels awful. Like a gross violation. The unimaginable and worst thing you could ever do to somebody. Imprisoning their consciousness or a portion of it. A copy of it, which is why it has no rights, like the show Severance is what I wrote. What else do I need to know? I drew a life standing next to this pod, awe and wonder, mysterious. It sounds amazing. Very good marketing, perfect targeting, not public. They find and pick you because the algorithm is perfect and you can't say no because it feels like this is exactly what you need. Like a sci-fi or Black Mirror episode. And I heard the quotes, come fly with me, join us, pick your package. There are several plans. Each has its own unique experience for the user. This is designed to draw them in so they'll be compelled to purchase the upgrades. It felt awful, and I wrote the words, stay away. Okay. I want to be clear. As of right now, most of that I don't think describes the Ark of the Covenant. I think I have a lot of stuff in my mind that I'm trying to process. Maybe it's a luminosity event where I'm tapping into something else, which is highly possible. But if it is, it's still not accurate remote viewing. And I need to be clear about that. I don't want to make these claims that, like, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. It can still have value to me, but that doesn't mean that I was accurate in what I was trying to do. I don't think that I did what I was trying to do. However, let's go back and look at the CIA document. And and I'm putting this out there publicly because I think that it holds me accountable. And I know those of you watching will give me honest feedback. Is this crossover that I found in here relevant, or is it not enough and I'm just off my rocker here? Because I really, it's important to calibrate our minds. So here we go. Project number, I don't need to go through all of that. 5 December 88. They were using CRV, and this was remote viewer number 32. The mission was to assess and describe the target identified by coordinate 781410/110121. This was training target number 0209, the Ark of the Covenant. Viewer 32 attained excellent sight contact, doing very well with stage 4 structure. Viewer also exhibits the ability to keep AOL to a minimum. Have to be careful with editing, though. This does not seem to be a problem at this time, just something to watch for. AOL is an analytical overlay. It's like you're making a conclusion as to what the target is, but it often acts as some kind of metaphor that's relevant to the target, but not the target. All right, let's look at the session summary here. December 5th, 1988. Target is a container. This container has another container inside of it. The target is fashioned of wood, gold, and silver. The target is similar in shape to a coffin and is decorated with seraphim. Okay, so I got that piece, right? I definitely got the container here. And I even wrote the word coffin. Okay, but I described my container as being like some kind of pillbox or end of life capsule. And maybe that's where it ends, but the fact that we both had that coffin piece, I think, is significant. This target is located somewhere in the Middle East, as the language spoken by individuals present seemed to be Arabic. Visuals of surrounding buildings indicated the presence of mosque domes. Individuals in the area were clothed in virtually all white, had black hair and dark eyes. One figure I homed in on wore a mustache. The target is hidden underground, dark, and wet, where all aspects of the location of the target. The purpose of this target is to bring people together. It has something to do with ceremony, memory, homage, the resurrection. Okay, what was I looking at here? I was looking at an end-of-life capsule here. I was looking at these experiences that were almost like different kinds of realities, or the passage of time being different here. If you're talking about something like the resurrection, maybe that's what we're dealing with as well. There's an aspect of spirituality, information, lessons, and historical knowledge far beyond what we know. And I feel like that, if you reduce it to its basic gestalts, we're in the ballpark here. We're trying to describe something very similar. Life approaches the pod. This is my data now. Approaches pod and views the display. Is he seeing the experiences of lives inside the pod, or is he seeing the possible experience he can have? And then I go in, it sounds like they're taking these lives or taking copies of these lives and these consciousness and uploading. It's like uploading consciousness to a cloud. Again, which is my biased worldview. But if the Ark really is some kind of tech, and it has an aspect of information, lessons, and historical knowledge far beyond what we know, then I think what I will say is then there's some crossover between my session and this session here. The target is protected by entities, see page 14, and can only be opened now by those who are authorized to do so. This container cannot be opened until the time is deemed correct. Once it is time to open the container, the mechanics of the lock system will be found to be fairly simple. Individuals opening the container by prying or striking are destroyed by the container's protectors through use of a power unknown to us. So, going out on a limb, coming back to my session here, if these are some kind of advanced technological pods, maybe dealing with I am completely speculating here, friends. Maybe as our technology recatches up, because I suspect there was a great reset. I think that we lost, as Graham Hancock says, we're a species with amnesia. Maybe our tech will catch up and then we'll recognize, oh, this is this kind of machine and this is how we use it. And now we don't have to hit it with a hammer and be destroyed by its security system. I'm filling in blanks here that may not be correct. Okay. All right. So let's look at the actual session here. Just some ideograms going through low level data here. The writing's tough to read. I'm going to do my best here. Again, looking at some basic low level gestalts here. More colors and textures. Now he draws what looks like the beginning of a structure with an arch. And then it looks like almost like a corner of a brick wall, or it could be the corner of the arc itself. Here's some architecture here. It could be, if you think of Indiana Jones and the ark, it had like that little roof on it. That's what his sketch looks like. For those of you that are just listening, it looks like a piece of that. Okay. There's no drawings here, excuse me, that match my pill shape. I want to be clear about that. However, he drew a little bulldozer here with little tank wheels on it and an arm that elevates. Okay. And what did I have here? Here's my little, very similar, my little bulldozer here, and his right there. Is this Indiana Jones's warehouse? And we're both describing a forklift. That's very odd thing to corroborate with the arc. Heavy, solid, thick, high, hollowed, contained, old. Again, low level data here that he has. AOL, break, prison, fortified, guarded, watched. So he's describing the location here, like a fortress or a prison. Contained, let's say contained people long ago. Windows, cubic rooms, high places. Again, very low level data describing the location, which he was tasked to do. He had an AOL of Auschwitz, Middle East. Now he's getting into Arabics, and he has a little sketch here of a mosque. Okay. Now, here's what's interesting. This is that page 14 piece. I can't read all of his writing. A double wall, a container, inside a container. So I can't read that word. Dark. Watch, and he says people, AOL, coffins. Watched by whom? Mummies. And he has this wall with a line of mummies running down the wall, or a line of like stick figures representing mummies that he labeled them running down the wall. Does that look familiar? Look at my sketch here. I've got the man standing at the walkway with a line of pods running down the wall. I'm trying to read his writing here. Many places, old passage, it's either flight or plight, mission, protection, knowledge, ancient. Go to container and open it and describe it as you go. He has an AOL here of spirits and a ghost. Now, again, spirits and ghosts, break it down. That could also be aspects of someone's consciousness. He has this circle or this wheel, and he writes, looks like the word altered. I can't tell if that says aware. Wooden smells, decay. I can't read all of his writing here, unfortunately. Silver, gold, low level data here. Decay, rotten, soft, tissue, cloth, objects, personal. The word death, gold, wood, copper, silver, stone, wood. Purpose and significance of the container. Ceremonial, death, resurrection, homage, protection. Joining together a people. Important historical, spiritual, knowledge, lessons, information. Coffin or place of burial. How is it opened? And he drew a seraphim, and this is this winged, that's a winged class of angels. He drew what looks like a griffin or a hawk here, but the seraphim. I see the word, I don't know if that's flying or dying. Wealth, information, knowledge, destroyed, pain, anguish, horror, terror. Quiche, death, scared, burned, light, power, forbidden, protected, lasting. I described this as was being done with the consciousness. It's on display like a museum, right, for that knowledge. But these people, their consciousness is being hoarded out, like technological reincarnation. And he said resurrection, reincarnation, resurrection. And I said, it feels awful, like a gross violation, the unimaginable and worst thing you could ever do to somebody. And he's calling it death, destroyed, pain, anguish, horror, terror. So again, I think and that's the end of his session here. I think that there's more to the arc than we realize. Um, I won't ever know unless I ever see the arc or we get some acknowledgement as to what it really is and what it really looks like. For all I know, there could be a pill-shaped structure within the square box of the arc. It could be a device that houses consciousness. I was chalking this up as the noise that's rattling around in my brain. The only reason I'm talking about this project publicly is because after I agreed that this was a miss and I was going to ignore it, the next day, or that evening actually, because this was last night, I was told to listen to the Joe Rogan podcast, not because of the ARC comment. Today I hear the ARC comment, and there it is, and we have that overlapping data with mine. So everything over the last few weeks, wondering, am I being misled? Am I too deep in the sci-fi mindset? Am I getting lost? Am I going down a dangerous road? I'm going to share one more compelling piece of data here. And I'm going, I don't really have that. I feel like I'm again stuck in this technological thing. Again, I had this energetic event happening in the sky and it's impacting the consciousness of everyone's minds, which goes back to, in my opinion, Edward's famous Q sessions, which sparked some of the ideas and concepts for the hive, which sent me off on this, deep dive rabbit hole. So maybe this is just noise and I'm still trying to process this because I'm just about finished writing the hive when I'm doing this particular session here, these sessions here. So let me share my screen and just get this over with here and get your opinions on this. Okay. So I had this sky phenomena. And you can see here, for those of you that are just listening, I'll describe it. You have this strange orb or lights in the sky, but you have this spiraling thing. And it's interesting. This part's not seen. If the clouds are removed, we would see a two-dimensional opening or a portal from the side or any angle. The cave does not exist. The cone does not exist in this dimension. Now, we just talked about, that woman, the congresswoman talking about interdimensional existence now. So here's one of the things that I'm seeing, and these people are seeing these energetics in the sky. I would think, okay, we can't verify that right now. It's a future event. Oddly enough, in 2022, you guys know that every month, roughly every month, I do, what's going on in my personal life? What information do I need to know? And I look ahead into the future for my own life and I gather information. I decided in 2022 to complete a project looking several years ahead into the future that happened to target the exact time frame of this project we just completed. Now, it was a front-loaded session because I knew that I was looking at what will my life experience be at this point in time in 2027. That was the time frame. What I didn't expect, what I didn't expect was for this project that I just did to have corroborating data. Um, Hang on, I'm adjusting my screen here so you can see it. So for this project that I did in 2022, I had a few elements of data that made no sense. They had nothing to do with my personal life. They were very sci-fi, and I just dismissed it again as noise or things that I think about and that go on in my mind. Sorry, I know some of my speech is choppy here, but I'm coordinating a lot of mental effort here. All right. So back to my screen share. If you remember the previous sketches of the spiral cone in the sky. And now what do I have? I have this energetic cone in the sky, a starburst or energy burst, a wormhole opening, something in the sky. And I wrote, and I feel love in this moment, spinning and turmoil. And then I had like this giant all-seeing eye. And then again, if you're not looking at this, I also drew a UFO and I drew two people floating up, come fly with me, pulled up together, but then repelled back down, safe landing and laughter. So I chalked this up as noise. Like, all right, maybe I'll get abducted, is what I said. But really, I doubt that's going to happen in 2027. UFOs, strange energetics in the air. Let me show you one more thing. One more screen I want to share with you. And then here I did several sketches for this project with Rabbit Hole of a concealed craft or intelligence in the clouds. And you can see here on the screen multiple UFOs up in the sky. So I can't get into how it all ties in, but after that conversation I had with the team, I'm very curious to see how things are going to play out. I think it's very interesting that in 2022, I decided to do a project that looked at that specific point in time and got data that corroborates and matches the data that I did for that particular project here in 2025. I suspect I'm giving myself feedback. My consciousness is communicating exactly as it was intended to. Then you tie in the fact that Daz picked this project and Daz assigned this project to me and the team. And, you really I start to think about things like the telepathy tapes and hive mindsets and, connected consciousness. As a remote viewing team starts to work together, the more projects we do, the better the division of effort gets and the better things tend to gel. And I noticed 3 out of 4 of us during this most recent project chose a very similar format in how we were presenting our data. Like our minds are just starting to work in sync. Am I a part of a feedback loop that reached back to me why would I pick 2027 and 2022 when I was really a novice remote viewer? My viewing, I'm not proud of those sessions back then, but that information made it through. Am I sending myself a message? And is the universe sending me a message in a variety of different ways? And I know this is where it starts to sound crazy, right? But like I've got the project I did in 2022 that happens to have correlating data to what I'm doing here in 2025, looking at the same exact time frame in 2027, and then I randomly get assigned on a blind target by ChatGPT to look at the Ark of the Covenant, and it has to do again with consciousness and the manipulation of consciousness. And I dismiss that data, and then I hear the Joe Rogan podcast that says, "Hey, by the way, here's someone else that has data that has some crossover." Am I making connections that don't exist? I don't know. I'm at a point where I'm rambling right now, my friends. I've shared a lot. This is why it's important to unplug and to get grounded. Our minds can spin. It's also important to be okay with failure, with missing, with being off target. I'm okay with being off target. I'm now trying to understand the meaning of all of this, even if the meaning is there is no meaning. And that's why I put it out there to the public. Again, I hope that keeps me honest with myself, and I welcome your feedback in terms of the implications of it. I feel like I'm rambling a lot now. My anxiety is taking over. So I'm going to end this session here, my friends. Again, I am excited. Shifting gears back to the Hive, Book 3, Origins. It's August 14th now. I would love to have it out by September, maybe October at the latest, if I can stay on schedule with editing and production of it. So look for more updates to come on that one. In the meantime, if you haven't read books 1 and 2, they're beautiful, fascinating stories. If you're interested in everything I talked about, there's a lot of good elements in that work. All right, enough promoting myself. I'm Dennis Nappy II with the Secret Podcast and Sixth Sense Media. Remember to never stop questioning, keep an open mind, and let your intuition be your guide. Thank you.
I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend, be water, my friend. Be water, my friend, my friend. Be water, my friend, my friend.